Jacksonville Jaguars fans, welcome into Duval Daily presented by GenJag.com. I'm Jordan DeLugo. Thanks so much for being here Tuesday, June 17th. So right now we're getting into who will lead the Jaguars in 2025 in catches and touchdown grabs as well. This is kind of going to be my breakdown of how I think targets will be dispersed in 2025, right? And kind of to help us set expectations, or at least my expectations, and get an idea for the roles that players will be featured in the Jaguars passing game, usage, volume of these Jaguars passing game weapons, just to kind of set the table a little bit with an in-depth look at this passing game. How many targets will there be to go around? All this type of stuff. So I'm excited to get into it. I think Liam Cohen will have a dynamic plan for the Jaguars passing attack. I think they have a dynamic group of pass catchers when it comes to Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter, Deami Brown, some of the backs out of the backfield. Travis Etienne has shown he can be an effective passing game weapon. LeQuint Allen has shown that as well. Brenton Strange, I think, is improving as a receiving tight end. So there's a lot to get excited about. And, of course, Trevor Lawrence being the quarterback, throwing the ball to all these guys. When he has been at his best, he's been one of the best quarterbacks in football. We've seen that for long stretches in 2022 and 2023. Better supporting cast around him. A lot of the success will hinge on, obviously, the offensive line's ability to protect Trevor Lawrence. But I do still think this is going to be a passing game that gets the ball out quickly. Think that you saw that quite a bit with Liam Cohen coaching the Bucs last year, and you've seen that throughout Trevor Lawrence's young career. So I don't think that's going away. I still think you're going to be able to get the ball out quickly, which will mitigate some of the responsibility of the offensive line. They don't have to win for a long time. They just can't get beat immediately in a lot of situations. So we'll dive into it. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content here, please like and comment. If you are not subscribed, please subscribe. Helps us out a ton, right? Let me know what y'all are expecting from the Jaguars passing game in the comment section below. So how many targets will there be to go around? That's kind of like the first part of this, like to work off of, right? How many times is Trevor Lawrence going to throw the football in 2025? And of course, this whole exercise will kind of assume health, which certainly is not safe to assume. But when you're doing projections and trying to break down how it's going to look, I'm not going to take into account injuries, which, someone that we're going to talk about today probably will miss some time. That's just kind of the way football goes, unfortunately. But we're not going to account for that right now, so just keep that in mind. So last year, Liam Cohen's only season in the NFL as a play caller, Baker Mayfield had 470 pass attempts. The Rams, when Liam Cohen was their offensive coordinator in 2022, had around, I think, over 500 passing attempts. So I think that you're probably looking at a pass-heavy offense. I think you're probably looking at, my ballpark guess is about 475. That's basically 28 a game. Maybe it's a little over. Maybe it ends up hitting like 30 pass attempts a game. But somewhere in that range, I think that they want to pass the ball a lot. They've invested a ton in the passing offense when you look at what they did with the interior of the offensive line, both in free agency and the draft, the depth on the offensive line in free agency and the draft. Brian Thomas Jr. obviously was already here, but they went and got Deami Brown. They went and traded up for Travis Hunter, who they're using primarily as a receiver. Maybe I shouldn't say primarily. I would say more heavily as a receiver than a corner, but certainly going to be very active in both spots. I mean, it's clear that they want to throw the football a lot. So I've got 475, which I don't think is a super high number in this modern NFL, but that's my best guess, around 475. And these numbers are going to be ballpark numbers just to get an idea of where these might land. It's not supposed to be like exact, but a general idea, general concept. So starting off with Brian Thomas Jr., when you're looking at 475 targets, I think BTJ on a given week will have like 20 at the low end to 35% at the high end, maybe even more of the target share. I think his final average will be somewhere around 30% of the targets, which would put him around 140 on the year, which honestly I would say is low, which might sound crazy, but like pretty sure he had more than 140 targets as a rookie. The reason I think that number could be a little bit lower this year is because let's see, how many did he? Oh, he had 133 in 16 starts, 17 games. Yeah, so I expect him to be a little bit higher actually than that. I think early on last year, he was not targeted super heavily consistently, being a rookie. But as the season went along, I mean, he was getting unbelievable amounts of targets throughout the year for the Jaguars offense. And it kind of felt like once Doug Peterson and company realized we don't have anyone else, Christian Kirk is hurt, et cetera, like they just started spamming the Brian Thomas Jr. button. From weeks 12 to 17, he did not have a game with under 10 targets, right? Before that, he was on a much slower pace. I expect him, again, to be around 30% target share, which is very high, around 140 targets for him. But, I mean, I think he's going to be utilized in every way imaginable. I think Liam Cohen said the offense going to run through Brian Thomas Jr. The passing game is going to run through Brian Thomas Jr. I think he'll be their touchdowns leader as well. I think, around 12 touchdowns is probably a reasonable expectation. But utilization-wise, yes, he's going to be targeted heavily. Where is he going to get the ball? Everywhere. Screens, slants, from the slot, from the X position, as a Z off the line of scrimmage. You're going to see condensed formations. You're going to see motion. You're going to see all the things you want to see really from a modern passing game in a lot of ways, I think. But I think he'll be a 3-level threat. Again, screens, slants, slot fades, go balls, in-breaking routes, digs, out-breaking routes, posts, corners, all these things are going to be in the wheelhouse for Brian Thomas Jr., I think, this year. And I think he's going to be a big red zone threat too. Not even just red zone. I think the Jaguars are going to take shots from outside the red zone, 25, 30 yards out. You can see Trevor Lawrence easily targeting Brian Thomas Jr. down there in the touchdown, in the end zone, right? So I think he's going to have a huge second year. Is he going to have more yards than he did last year? Let's see. If I have him at 140 targets, let's say he catches what? He caught 65% of his targets last year. Let's say he does that again. 140 times 0.65. That's 91 grabs. He'll probably average at least 14 yards per catch. That's right about the same number as last year, yardage-wise, and I expect him to get a couple more touchdowns. So, huge year. And he came third in the NFL, entire league last year, in receiving yards. So he's going to just, in my opinion, continue on that trajectory. The one thing you want to see him improve, well, there were a couple things. Making sure that he's at the correct route depth is critical. A couple times it looked like Trevor Lawrence made an errant throw. We found out later on BTJ just wasn't in the right spot. Also, and these are very nitpicky type things, but they make a difference. There was another interception Trevor threw where BT needed to release outside. He released inside, and that messed up the spacing of the entire route concept, the entire passing concept, I should say, and led to a defender being in a spot where if he had released outside, that wouldn't have been the case. So things like that, just the minor details, they can make a huge difference. And then also just the double catching. You saw a lot of double catching last year. Almost every time he double caught it last year, he actually came up with the football, but that's kind of a risky way to live. You want to see the hands a little bit more consistent. Otherwise, there likely will be at some point in his career some more volatility with the drop rate Other than that, I mean, the guy's an absolute superstar. He is. So very excited to see him in year 2. And then I do think Travis Hunter will end up being the second leading receiver for the Jaguars in 2025. He will also be utilized as a 3-level threat, moved around a ton. I think that he's still working on the ability to release off the line of scrimmage against press. Like, that was one of the questions on Brian Thomas Jr. coming into last year, but he immediately answered it with his feet and with his hands. Like, he's just a natural. He's a stud. So that's something Travis Hunter will need to improve on in terms of, like, releasing against press if he's lined up as the X receiver. But I think he's going to be moved around a ton. I think BT will be lined up as an X more than Travis Hunter. I think Hunter will be in the slot, lined up as a Z quite a bit. Again, pre-snap motion, a lot of condensed formations. Right now, I feel like he's really good at almost every route in the route tree outside of kind of some of these routes where you have to stop and come back to the football, like a hitch, a comeback, things like that. I don't think that those are his bread and butter right now, but everything where he's keeping it moving, again, in-breaking routes like digs down the field, outbreakers, deep out, screens, slants, posts, corners, slot fades, all the things that I'm talking about Brian Thomas Jr. being able to do, I think Travis Hunter is going to be able to do as well. And both of these guys do have the ability to come down with some contested catches, so you can really target them heavily when you need a bucket, right? When you need a touchdown on third down in the red zone, when you need a first down on third down outside of the red zone, right? These guys can be those bucket getters, those clutch guys that really come up with it in a big way. But I think that Deami Brown initially could be the number 2 in targets while Travis Hunter gets his feet wet. That might not be the case. It might just be hit the ground running for Travis. We'll see. But I do think Travis Hunter will have over 100 targets, somewhere around 20 to 25% of the targets. I think that the middle number there would put him around 115 targets on the year, which I think feels reasonable. I would put his touchdowns anywhere from 7 to 10, somewhere in that ballpark. Conservatively, I think seven is a decent number when you're talking about 115 targets for Travis Hunter. I know that you can raise question marks about, like, how many targets will he have, how many reps will he have on offense and defense and all that stuff. The Jaguars traded up, and they gave up a lot, right? They obviously used their first-round pick this year, which that's neither here nor there. They were going to use it anyways. But they gave up a first-round pick in 2026. They gave up a second-round pick in 2025. They gave up a lot to go get Travis Hunter. Let's not make any mistake about that. They're going to utilize him heavily. Right now, he's more focused on offense than defense. I think he's going to end up playing a lot of both. I think that he's going to be a big, big part of the Jaguars' offense. So, again, I'm expecting 20% of the target share plus for Travis Hunter in year 1. I think Deami Brown, as I mentioned, he could be early on a number 2 target. And I think that there will be games where he is the number 2 target. I would be surprised if he ever has more targets than both Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter in a given game. I think that those two guys are going to be by far the leading target getters. But I think Deami's going to have some games. I think he's going to be featured at times. I think he'll be in the 15 to 20% range for the year, but I think there will be games where he could be above that 20% mark. I split the difference at 17.5%, which puts him right around 83 targets. He doesn't really have a limited route tree in terms of his ability to run routes. I do still think, even though they're talking him up, you're still going to see a lot of what he did in Washington, which is a lot of screens and a lot of deep shots. He's really good in those areas. And Liam Cohen has utilized those very well throughout his coaching career. And then you've also got the fact that Trevor Lawrence is an excellent deep ball thrower. So all those things kind of lead me to believe he's still going to be a heavy screen and deep shot type of guy, vertical route tree, but he absolutely has the ability to run a full route tree. I would say you're probably not going to get much in the way of contested catch opportunities, so you're going to want to have him running routes where it's designed for him to create separation and get open. I think Deami will have around 60 catches, 4-5 touchdowns, That's my expectation for him. So between those three guys, I think you're looking at about 70% of the targets. They're going to be the heavy leaders in the passing attack for the Jaguars week in and week out. But there still are some other guys that will have an impact. I think Britton Strange will be next up. From an individual standpoint, I think he's probably going to get about 10 to 12% of the target share, about 50 to 60 targets for Britton Strange this year. And I'm not sure how many targets he had last year. But last year, I think, he got leaned on more heavily throughout the year. And at times he was kind of one of the featured targets in a given game. He ended up having 40 catches last year on 53 targets. I expect it to be similar, and not because he can't do more, but because this offense has so many weapons. I think if he needed to be a heavier target share type of guy, he easily could handle that. I just don't think that's what's needed in this offense. I think they're going to utilize his ability to block and space a ton, his physicality. I do think there will be games where he'll be more heavily featured than a 10 to 12% target share. Matchup dependent, different things like that. If there's injuries, whatever. He can be the focal point of the passing game in certain games, or a focal point, maybe not the focal point, but a focal point, top 2-3 target for you in a given game. But that's not going to be how it's going to go all year long, in my opinion. I think you're going to see lots of quick game targets for him. He can be a red zone threat as well. I've got him at 4 touchdowns. And then I think looking at the running backs, they'll probably be about 12 to 15% of the targets, with Etienne and LeQuint Allen leading the way there. Probably 60 to 70 targets for them. Lots of screen stuff which will give them some opportunities to get the ball in space and show what they can do. I think Etienne will be a heavy screen utilization type of guy. I think Allen can run a lot of routes out of the backfield, like legitimate, angle routes, out routes, and breaking routes out of the backfield, and be a target that way as a dump off type of guy. I would guess about 3 touchdowns for the running backs receiving out of the backfield. And then that leaves about 5% for everyone else when you're talking about, backup tight ends, Hunter Long, Johnny Munt, Quentin Morris if he makes the team, Parker Washington, anyone else who sees the field, and probably a couple touchdowns to that group as well. And that would put us right around 475 again, ballpark. That's not the exact number, but somewhere in that range, 28 to 30 targets a game or passing attempts a game for Trevor Lawrence. And speaking of Trevor Lawrence, when you add up all those numbers in terms of the touchdowns, I do think he's going to clip 30 touchdown passes this year. I think he has all the tools in place to be able to do that. I think he's going to accomplish that. I think he's going to limit turnovers better than he has overall. Now, for a lot of his career, when he's been healthy, interceptions haven't been an issue. But fumbling has been a little bit of an issue for Trevor Lawrence. At times, it's been a big issue. Overall, it's usually just kind of a minor issue for him. But that's something he can definitely improve upon. I think he's going to, with this passing game, the way Liam Cohen's going to dial it up, again, with a lot of pre-snap movement, with a lot of bunch formations, with all the talent that they have to throw the football to, and the ability to get the ball out quickly, I expect Lawrence to have a very good year. And that's what I'm looking at for the Jaguars 2025 passing attack. I think it's going to be one of the more efficient passing attacks in the league. I think it's going to be explosive. I think it's going to be dynamic with all the different skill sets you have. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. So let me know, again, what y'all think in the comment section below about the Jaguars passing attack. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe if you have not already. And y'all have a good one.